Uh, I cannot see you. Um, so anyway, I just wanted to spend some brief time with you this morning to talk about this concept of fit. So whenever we use the word fit, there's usually a lot of power behind it, and we don't always pull apart what we mean when we throw it out there. So I say it's like dropping the F-bomb, like, hey, I don't know if they'll fit. And then there's kind of some air sucked out of the room. So because we have a really brief amount of time together today, I'm going to have a lot of slides that I'm going to go through or almost skip over, but you're going to have access to all the slides afterwards. So if you have questions, definitely reach out. So in the interest of time, we will get going. So as was mentioned in my bio, I am in the Office of Student Financial Aid. I've been here for 15 years in July. Really focusing on access to higher education. The opportunities in my portfolio, you actually don't have to use a FAFSA. So you don't have to definitely use a FAFSA to apply for a scholarship or to seek an employment opportunity, which is really cool because there are students out there who can't complete a FAFSA, like students who are international, DACA, undocumented. So things in my team are things that are really accessible to any type or any student. And so with that aside, I also like to show a little bit about my personal life. So this is my husband, Chalk. This is my son, QB, and me. And I just wanted to spoil it. I mean, the Christmas for us just happened, but Santa is unfortunately not real. So that means Santa can be any color you want him to be. And so at our house, Santa is chocolate. And so this is us representing our chocolate Santa shirts. And I hope that you enjoyed BSS Black Santa season, which just occurred. And as we're moving into clearance season, please definitely try and scoop up some of those chocolate Santas as you're out and about. But when we think about fit and we think about kind of these concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I really encourage you to think about what diversity, equity, and inclusion means to you, and to like almost take an activity, take a moment to like write it down and see what you come up with. And so this is what I came up with when I thought about what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you, Lo. So I believe that it focuses on race and ethnicity most frequently, but it's also so much more than that. It's a fabric of our beings that makes each one of us unique, but some of the fabric is more visible than other. So that's why it's important to recognize the difference between the seen and the unseen. I challenge myself to be involved in things I do not understand and share my story to help others understand. So if you have a choice to opt in or opt out of tough conversations, I hope you opt in because many people with visible diversity don't have that choice. So as a person of color, when I'm in the world, in our predominantly white institution, predominantly white community, there are lots of conversations perhaps about race and ethnicity that are happening with me, without me, to me. And so that's what I mean by if you have the privilege to opt in or opt out, I hope you opt in because a lot of us aren't really being given that choice. We're part of a larger conversation. So in going through the agenda, I will quickly share some intentions I have for you for the next 15 minutes. I will share with you a written and visual land acknowledgement. I'll share some ground rules. I'll give you some examples of where we see this F-bomb being dropped frequently and try to understand it a little bit more, and then some practices, and there'll be some questions that you can consider after today as well. So for you all this morning, I want you to think through like what you're intended, what you're coming here with this morning, what you're hoping to gain out of this presentation. And so when I think about that, I have these assumptions. And so I assume that everyone here in this space has these biases. And these biases that are impacting how you're thinking about fit in your hiring process could be impacting it. And I hope that you want to understand and address if this is having some sort of impact on anything you're doing. And that's because I assume that everyone wants to address systemic inequality. So if something you're doing is contributing to a negative impact, that you want to address that because it's part of a bigger system. We're all part of a bigger system. And I also assume good intentions. So does super mean-spirited, outward, racist, sexist, all of the ists happen? Absolutely. But when I'm thinking about fit today, I'm thinking about it more from the, I didn't know my brain was doing that. And now that I'm aware, what can I do to get in the way of that line of thinking? And so that means that these small adjustments that we make can have larger impacts. Hard to do, especially when we're in this systemic nature of things. It feels like a lot of the times, whoa, is me, I cannot make a small adjustment that has any sort of impact, but I do think there is a snowball. I also think this is a journey. So if you thought you were going to hear about this morning and reach some sort of level of higher understanding altogether, unfortunately, that's not how it works. We are imperfectly beautiful humans. And so we are continuing to refine and move forward through life together. So this is one of the slides that I'm kind of going to go past. This is the written land acknowledgement for the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I'm occupied, where I am currently doing this presentation. Our brains, when we hear and see things that are written, sometimes they skip over it. And so for that, I am inviting you to look at a visual land acknowledgement, a different way of consuming the exact same information. And so what you see on this map are circle stars. The circle stars are all the four-year institutions in the state of Wisconsin. The stars without circles are the two-year affiliated campuses. And so I just want you to take a moment, if you've been to Wisconsin, if you're in Wisconsin, if you're currently visiting something, think about where you are and where that is in relation to the land that is occupied. Okay, thanks for that. So a couple things for the next 10 minutes or 11 minutes or so. If I share really specific examples about my life, I would ask that you don't take that with you to your next conversation, but take the learning out of it. I hope that these slides after today and in this next little brief help you gain a deeper understanding of yourself or start you in that process and think about how your identities influence how you interact and think about this concept of fit. And then as you are an organization, I hope that you consider to continue these conversations after today so that you can continue learning from each other and helping with that journey. So here are some real life examples I've come across from dropping the F-bomb, the fit bomb, in my life practice. This is my first favorite one. So that cute little boy you saw a few slides ago, his name is QB. And yeah, he decided to use the word F to make his peers laugh, but he had a pretty decent afternoon. And this is from 4K. I think this is really funny, mainly because I'm always curious when I look at this. This is now like 4 years old, but I wonder what in the world you have to do in Dragonfly to get a frowny face. Like apparently you can swear like a sailor at age 4 and not get a frowny face in Dragonfly because you're there to make your peers laugh. So just putting a little levity into what's a very serious concept. We are continuing to work on cleaning up our language in our household. Perhaps there's other parents on the call who also struggle with this. But here are some real life examples. So I'm on the search and steering committee. And we're trying to decide who we should hire. As we're discussing the 3 finalists, all are well qualified for the position. However, one of the candidates, Jelani, is a non-traditional age student, whereas the other students are traditional age. You're having a hard time deciding which candidate to hire, and you turn to your committee members and say, I wonder if Jelani will fit. That's an F-bomb. Here's another one. So it's been 3 weeks since Giorgio started in your office, and they're having a hard time learning the duties of the position. You're venting to a coworker and you say, I'm not sure Giorgio is a good fit. It's another version of an F-bomb. And here's my last one. So you're working in a new position and you're having trouble communicating with your supervisor. You're feeling pretty bored and underutilized. This isn't what you thought you applied for, but you're trying to be positive, you start to wonder, is this job a good fit? That's another F-bomb. So if we're thinking about when we use this word fit, and hopefully some of these examples resonated with you, I've done some research on this topic, and I've broken out what I think of fit into two categories. One is cultural fit and one is application fit. So when we think about cultural fit, we're thinking about screening potential candidates or being in an environment where people have an impact on the culture of the organization. And so it could be based on the alignment of values and beliefs and behaviors between an employee or an employer or in your employment group, basically. And this tends to really land in the subjective realm. So it has a lot to do with personality traits and who we are and how we interact together. So that's kind of what I think of when I think of cultural fit. When I think of application fit, I think it's more related to qualifications listed in a vacancy description, things that are measured and mentioned in interviews, performance evaluations. These are things that are tending to be in the objective realm, things that are measurable that you can kind of point to. Do you have this or do you not? So two different ways. There is positive and negative aspects of both types of fit, but it's just different ways of thinking about that concept as you move forward. So when I think about these two concepts, cultural fit and application fit, remember I said cultural fit lands more in that subjective realm, that area that's a little bit more gray and fuzzy. And so when we think about cultural fit, I think that's where our own biases really start to come into play. And so when we think about biases like implicit bias, that subconscious thing that I mentioned earlier that's happening in your brains, not the outward ist, racist, sexist, not that, but in your brain, it impacts your decision-making, basically outside of your conscious awareness. And so this impacts your socialization, your interpreting unfamiliar information, your decision-making. And we all have these biases, but we're not all aware about how they're impacting us as we move through life. And so there's all these implicit association tests online. And if you look at them, they're given to millions of people. There's all different ones you can take, but on one that's called the black-white one, they find that on a subconscious level, we see white people favoring white people. So just something to be aware of. Once you can identify where these bias spots are, you can start to address them and learn and grow from them. And so I encourage you to look into those tests online. I'm into fitness taco in my mouth. We love tacos at my house. I think it's taco Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. It's taco every day. I don't know. Maybe we have time. I don't know if we have time to watch this video, but this is a quick 2-minute video that I encourage you to watch after today. It kind of explains implicit bias a little bit more and thinking about it like peanut butter and jelly. So we've been conditioned and socialized to think about peanut butter goes with jelly. And that's how bias kind of works. It's like a fog that we breathe in our whole lives and that we don't really realize is having an impact on us until we get to a point where we're kind of taking a step back and having a realization moment. So like salt and pepper. Like if I say salt, sometimes you're like, oh, pepper is what goes next. And so those are the shortcuts your brain is making. And one thing that I always like to point out is that I think biracial people are the best people in the universe, and that is my bias. And so it's fine for me to be biased towards biracial people in a way, but I can't let that impact my decision-making. I can't let that have me say, I don't know if Deanna will fit because of this or that. So there's like a difference between having affinity and using that to make your decisions.
Implicit bias.
Past that. So then remember that concept of application fitness. That's where I said, hey, these should be some measurable qualities. When we think about that in our hiring processes, even in evaluation processes, these are some key areas that are going to impact you and something that you need to start thinking about. And so like names, when we look at hiring processes, names on applications have an impact. White sounding names are more likely to receive responses. than non-white sounding names. There's been tons of studies about this, even how we respond to email. If we're white and socialized in a way in which we see something familiar, we gravitate towards familiar. And so we prioritize things that way. So you need to be really aware of that. We also see this with gendered names in fields like space. I don't know what this field of space is, astronomy. But in fields of space where you're trying to look through super awesome telescopes, they find that applications for looking out the telescope that have female sounding names were less likely up until a certain point to get time to look through the telescope than the male sounding names. And so just a name has a lot of impact on your processes. I will say, usually someone's like, well, let's just redact all the names. I guess redact the names if you can assess whether it's having the desired impact. Don't just redact the names to redact the names, because you are a curious human. And so when I see redacted names, I am all of a sudden super interested, super aware of other things on the application, and I need to slow myself down and decide whether that's important or not. The other thing that really impacts how we look at these hiring processes are the horns and halos. So the horns are when you see something distasteful that makes you separate that person off and kind of give it a negative vibe or negative feel. Up until last weekend, I would have said like Bears fans, because I'm a Packers fan. Bears fans are the horns. I don't like Bears fans. But this weekend now it's Lions fans. I don't like Lions fans. I mean, I also don't like Bears fans, but I don't like Lions fans even more. So I have to be really aware of when I'm interacting with people and I read something that is different or something that's distasteful to me, that I'm not making it a decision based on that. And the halo is true as well. Like I said, I love biracial people. And so if I see something that someone's multiracial, I have a physical feeling. Actually, I can feel it in my chest right now. I can feel it in my face where I'm excited. And so I can't let that dictate my decision-making either. Another thing to think about is who's getting information. So that's what I mean by recruitment networks. Oftentimes people of color, for example, aren't aware of opportunities. And so they are not a part of pools that you're hiring for. And so thinking about how we're really intentionally sharing information out and not relying on the one person that is a representative of that whole group. Like, don't make that assumption. Don't put that burden on that person. I'm only one low. I can't let everyone know. And so really thinking about how am I advertising? How am I sharing information out? We also like a lot of pizza at my house. So on those days that I didn't mention, we were eating tacos, we were eating pizza. And why is this important? That's the key point, is because managers, you all can make wiser, more ethical decisions if you become mindful of your biases and mindful of these impacts on that cultural and that application fitness. We'll just fly through these briefly because I know we're really short in time, but when we're thinking about cultural fitness, the key point I want you to pull out of here is, can you render any of these considerations into more objective terms? So for example, if you like someone because they have an outgoing personality and they need to do some sort of outreach in the community, please make sure that something to that effect is on the job listing, something that people are aware of, that they're being measured on before you just go into your decision making and make these decisions. You want people to know upfront what they're going to be evaluated on. Same with applications. You know, can you reject the information, but also do you need to? Is it having the same impact? I always encourage people to look at all their job requirements to see if they're required really, or is it the way we've always done it? In my unit, we recently decided to put a position as a bachelor's degree preferred because we ultimately decided that someone with enough experience could potentially do the position and not necessarily need a college degree. So just something to think about. And then in general, there's all these other things that are going to impact your decision making, your fit, And that's being short on time, being hungry and tired. Yes, yes, and yes. Unfortunately, it's something to be aware of. You got to have a snack. You got to take a walk around your office. If you're reading resumes from 1 to 30, you know, number 1 and number 30 didn't get the same low or Lauren because low number 1 was really on it and number 30 was definitely more fatigued. So these all have impacts on your understanding of fitness. You can check these out afterwards, but here are some resources that you can continue to review after today. The last thing I'll point out is that we're all super complicated, amazing people. And this person right here, my son, is the most complicated person I've ever met, and I helped make him. But you can never go down the path of being like, okay, I've got it. I'm super anti-racist. My fitness is perfect in this category. Well, yeah, that's cool. But like, there's all these other sides of you. So like for me, I do social identity wheels. You Google them, you can do them online. They really don't take that much time, but those will tell you where your key pushers are. And those are the ones you need to focus on. So I'm a mom, I'm biracial, I'm athletic, I'm a survivor, I'm friendly, I'm cisgender, I'm storyteller, I'm a wife, I'm a. I know these are my most salient identities, and these are the ones that are going to push my fitness ideas all over the place. So just kind of something to keep in mind, like where are those areas I need to focus on? You can find them. And when you're in a committee and you're making decisions, the confirmation bias thing is just trying not to ask people for their opinion when you already know what their opinion is, because we all do that. We just want it reflected back. We want to have real conversations. So just keep that in mind. Soliciting diverse thought is always awesome. So I want you to think about what you're going to do after today. We're going to find some additional resources. What are those resources? I hate reading, which is funny because I'm in a doctoral program, but I really hate reading. So I do a lot of podcasts. So I encourage podcasts usually. And I'll have a list that I can send out afterwards of my favorite podcasts. And then there's some questions that you should think of after today. Like, have you ever said it? Like I said, it has positive and negative effects. I think the most important thing that when someone says an F-bomb is to put on your 5-year-old annoying hat and say, but why? And keep saying, but why, until you get to the point. Because usually when someone says like, I don't know if they'll fit, then you say, but why? And then they'll say something like, well, I don't know. And then you'll say, but why? And you keep going until they say, this is it, like, this is it. So I really encourage you to push yourselves to try and do that. And you can blame me. Lo told me to be obnoxious. And that's pretty much it. I went super fast. So hopefully you can get the slides and my resources afterwards. These are my newer Black Santa BSS Black Santa Squad friends, Nick and Nicolette. I did that to plant this in your subconscious so that after today, if you see Black Santas out and about, you might remember how Lo did this 20-minute presentation on fitness, and these Black Santas are coming to mind. And like I said, the season is over, but the clearance season has just begun. Whew. So that is it. I'm open for 5 minutes of questions.
So if we have any brave participants, you guys can come off of mute. Otherwise, you can put it into the chat and we can answer those questions.
Yeah, as you're trying to think of a question you might have, one question I usually get is, and I can stop sharing actually. How do I talk to my kids about like fitness and these like interesting high level concepts? Good question. I'm a practicing parent myself. I usually rely on PBS. They have a lot of really great resources that can help you in understanding that concept of fit. And like I said, another thing that usually comes up is there is like a positive side of fit. There is a negative side as well. So there's place and space for both of those. Like if you're operating a front desk, you really want someone who is like perhaps outgoing and can talk to a variety of different people. So having that kind of fitness with the group that's doing that is really important. But it's fine if you don't have any questions. It's pretty early.
I think it's also hard to ask questions if this is a newer topic being brought up to you. So it's something like you said, it's not a concept that you are going to be an expert in after watching a 20-minute webinar. It might also be something where next week, next month, whatever it might be, you start to come up with questions. So Lo, would you be available to answer any questions if people reach out separately to you?
Yes, definitely. I would be happy to. I think one thing, I mean, it was a lot to digest. So kudos to everyone who's drinking their coffee and making it through. But one thing to keep in mind is like sometimes we're in these search and screen committees or in these hiring committees, and there's a lot of power dynamics at play. So you may not be the senior most person in the room, and the senior most person in the room kind of goes down this path of, I don't know if they'll fit. And so that can be really hard to navigate with how do I find my voice? How do I interject into a conversation when I do feel a little bit of risk in sharing and speaking up? But that's just something that I continue to work on, that I continue to work with allies in groups that I know. Hey, it might be hard for me to say something if something racially related comes up, because that's something that's very important to me. And so I usually try and work and scheme with a buddy who can help in those situations. Now, that's not the solution for every single place and space, but it's just something really to keep in mind. I totally recognize that there are definitely power dynamics in play in all of the groups and spaces we're in that makes it hard to have that voice. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. I was just looking at our chat box and it doesn't look like we have anything, but I'll give it one more minute here. If we have any brave souls that want to come off of mute, feel free.
I don't necessarily have a question, but I do want to share with the group that I saw Lo speak at a conference this summer, and this information is great. And just to reiterate that this is a journey, it's wonderful listening to Lo speak again. There's always little tidbits that I was like, oh yeah, I should probably think about that or do that. So we'll make sure that the vice presidents share all of the information with you, and then you can rewatch this presentation as well on the WEHA YouTube channel. We'll share the link for that too.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'll send out my slides and all of the additional resources I have afterwards. And yeah, as you digest it and consume the information after today, if you have questions or want to connect further, there's a different group that you think this would be a great presentation for, just let me know.
All right, and I did see one in the chat box that says, when will the link be available? I will hopefully have this presentation uploaded by the end of the day. It just kind of depends on my inspection schedule. So otherwise, we will have it by tomorrow.
Alrighty, well, thank you, everybody. It was great spending some time with you. Hopefully you get your coffee going and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Lo.
Bye.